So my name is Almiray. I'm an Oracle employee. I'm here as a community member. I have a fancy title, but I like to call myself a seasonal sorcerer just because I like to work with source code. I've been working with, I've been doing Java since the early days. Yay, 30 years of Java. Anyone here doing Java since 1995 besides me? Yeah, my people. So yeah, I've been working with source for a long, long time, but I love open source. So this is the reason why I like to travel around the world and talk about the experiences and share the knowledge. So I'm quite happy to be here with you as well. Now, we're going to talk about Maven, and I'm going to showcase some of the pitfalls that we encounter when using Maven. At the beginning, I don't know if that was the case for you, but when I learned Maven, and that was in the, by the time when Maven 1 came out. So anyone remember Jelly and the project.xml file? Good, because those were the wild times. And yeah, so many different things that happened out there. So hopefully you don't have to go through those things anymore. We're going to cover also the Enforcer. Anyone here using the Enforcer plugin? Everybody raise their hand, please. Yeah, this is, I hope that if you take just one thing away from this session is use the Enforcer plugin. Next one, we're going to talk about reproducible builds and reproducible artifacts. Anyone here doing that? Everyone knows what a reproducible artifacts is? Great, so you're going to learn something new. And obviously, whenever we talk about Maven, is dependency hell. We're just going to cover a little bit, because if I were to talk about dependency management, it will take us like 5 hours. And again, we have a party to go in a few minutes. And obviously, we want to talk also about making our builds more performant, faster, have a little bit of speed. All right? OK, you're ready. So I'll try to make this as interactive as possible. Feel free to raise your hand, ask questions, and please don't throw any tomatoes. All right, how do you build a Maven project? Which command do you use to build a Maven project? Someone say package. Some verify, clean package. Just compile. Something with an archetype? No, we want to build it. Archetype will be to create a project, but that's a good thing. Yeah. No. Because this is the first rule of Maven Club. You do not invoke Maven cleanstall. Now, in case that it was not clear, this is the second rule. Right? And the third rule is you do Maven verify. Now, why is that the case? I could also spend quite some time explaining in full detail what is the case, but this will probably give it a better example. There's a bunch of memes that go around why Maven Verify is better than Maven Cleanstall, but the actual real reasons why we should be doing Maven Verify versus Maven Cleanstall were pretty well explained by Robert, sitting right there with us in the audience, back in DevOps 2019, before we broke into COVID. And so the thing is that Maven Cleanstall is a relic from the old times. In the past, Maven did not have incremental compilation, so we had to do clean all the time. And when you invoke install, as you know, Maven goes through a series of life cycles. Do you know what is the life cycle before install? It's verify. So every time that you invoke install, you actually go through all the phases through verify and then install. Install is only responsibility is to copy the artifacts that we built in this current session and copy them into a Maven local repository or another place. But because it goes through all the phases, verify does everything for you. For those that said, I'm going to use package to build my project, it's doable, yes. But if your project happens to have integration test cases, then you will be missing them. You will have to invoke another phase to do that. Guess which phase is going to be? Verify. So most of the times, if you invoke Maven Verify, you should be fine. If something doesn't work well, it could be because one plugin in your build is not working properly, and that's a bug. So we would like to find those things and try to fix them as soon as possible. And there are some times when you're switching within different source branches in your repository. This is the time when maybe you will need to use clean. but not all the time. So I'm not saying never invoke clean and never invoke clean install, but try to invoke at most of the time verify. So this is my rant about Maven verify. But Robert has definitely much more compelling reasons why this is the case and why it would be better to do that.
That was a great summary.
Thank you, Robert. All right, so I'm going to showcase a few snippets of code, some projects. Their repository is available in that URL. That QR code will also give you access to the code. It's granted, there are trivial examples. The whole point is to showcase the very basics, and then you can extrapolate what we learned today into your builds, because I'm pretty sure that your builds will be much, much bigger than what I'm going to showcase. But it's my hope that your builds will become simpler once we know a few of the tricks that we're going to learn today. I also expect that some of you will be aware of most of the things I'm going to showcase. So this is going to be a mix within the intermediate and advanced uses. So we see how we go. All right?
Can I briefly ask a question?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
So what exactly is the problem with the clean?
What is the problem with the clean? So every time that you build a project, if you have incremental compilation, if you just have to do, again, compile, 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 and you will take advantage of the previous classes that were built. You don't have to rebuild all those things. But if you do clean, then you throw away all those compiled classes and everything that was processed and resources, and you have to do it again. So it's a matter of speed.
But if you remove this class, you don't need it anymore.
So if you remove the source code for the compiled class and you don't need it anymore, what's going to happen, right? So the old class, I think, will remain in the directory, and that's a little bit of a problem. So this is one of the cases when you will definitely need to invoke clean, right? So when you're just adding and appending, it's all right. Renaming might be a bit tricky, but when you remove, then yeah, just invoke the clean. Okay. Oh. I'm jumping ahead of time. So this is the moment when, yeah, thank you for coming to my session. So let's see. This is a very trivial example. Let's make it bigger, like that. Okay. And, well, there's nothing really strange about this. It's a simple project. We have some properties. We have a plugin here. Does anyone see something weird here? We're missing the version of the jar plugin. Is that a problem? No. No, it's not a problem. Why is not a problem? It will get it from the superpump. Which version will it be? Exactly. Why is that the answer? Because it depends on which version of Maven I'm going to use to run this project. Because depending on the Maven version, we'll grab a version of the super pump, which is the one that tells us what are the defaults for all the basic plugins, right? So if in a version, again, let's see. Who still uses Maven 363? Which is quite common. Okay, good. Who is using Maven 3.8x? The latest version is 3.8.8. Good. Do you know which version of the compiler you're using? It's 3.1.0. Who switches to 3.9.0? Just by moving one version over, you'll be using the version 3.11.0 of the compiler, because we made changes in the super pump. And if you're moving forward into newer versions of Maven, then that compiler version will be different. Is that a problem? Potentially, because the outputs will probably be different. And if you are into reproducible builds, let me tell you, if you do not fix every single plugin version, and if you do not fix the Maven version you want for your project, your build is very likely not going to produce reproducible artifacts. So, quite important to do this. So, let's run this. Which version of Maven would you like to use to run this project? 3.8 or 3.9? 3.9? Yeah, actually, it's going to make it work. So, let's go into this project. And let's ask for the version number. And we have Maven 3.8.8, and I'm using Java 21. Anyone here in Java 24? Anyone eager to try 25? Sure. Remember, it's coming out in September. OK, so I'm going to build this project. And I'm using, you probably noticed that I'm not using the Maven command. I'm using a tool that I wrote myself. It's called GUM. This detects if you're using the Maven wrapper or the Maven command. Who uses Maven wrapper? Everybody please raise their hands. Okay. I will explain why the wrapper is good, but for the time being, this command detects whether you want to use one or the other. So the next thing we saw is that we should be using verify, right? Does verify tell you something about what you want to do? What does verify mean? Package is clear, test, compile, and the others. But does verify tell you something about, oh, I'm going to build the whole thing? Anyone here uses Gradle? Okay, a few hands. How do you build a Gradle project? You say Gradle build. It has a build command. Wouldn't it be great if Maven would have a build command so that you could do exactly what you want to do instead of just saying verify? Well, this is another thing that this tool does, is that it allows you to switch commands. And there's a way that you can have a mapping between one thing and the other. So in my case, if I do gum build, it will do the right thing, except it fail. Because it's Maven 3.8.8 using Java 21, which is quite common, right? And what does it say? Source option file is gone with Java 21. Does anyone know how to fix this problem? We can downgrade to JDK 17. Or go back to Java 8, obviously. We set the Java version in the POM. How do we set that? In a property, perhaps for the compiler, right? Or better yet, I know for a fact that this problem is caused because the version of the compiler that we're pulling in, which is 3.10, quite old, and it supports Java 5. If we just switch to Maven 3.9x, this goes away. SDK, use, everybody uses SDK to install Maven, right? SDK, use Maven 3.9.9, which I already have here. And I do Maven build, and it works. Yay! You notice that there is a warning there that says that particular plugin version, where is it? No, right here, on the top. This is kind of like a malformed POM file. It's missing a explicit version for the jar file. Now this is still marked as a warning. Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this will be an error in Maven 4. Or I don't know if it still will be a warning.
I don't know the current state of it, but yes, it could be.
It could be now an error. So try to define versions as much as you can. So how can we fix the issues on this project? Well, we can give it a version number here, like a version, and I think it's 3.3.0 at the very least. And we can also enable these properties. So the other suggestion, instead of switching to Maven, was to specify which version of Java we want to pass to the compiler. We can define a compiler block for the plugin, or we can just define one of those useful user properties that many plugins expose to set up their configuration. So one of the most well-known is the Maven compiler release. This property, I think, was added in, for sure, is added in plugin version 3.11.0 of the compiler, but it was not available in previous versions of the compiler, like 3.1.0. Okay?
3.8 something, I did it.
Perfect.
And you can also use Java version, isn't it? Or is it
No, it has to be the compiler version.
okay.
So we invoke this, and now, no warnings. We don't have the warning for the missing version, and we don't have the warning of the resources that we were using the default encoding. Okay, so as much as you can, read the logs that are happening and find ways to get rid of those warnings. Because as time passes by, some of those warnings may be upgraded to errors. Okay, so how can we protect ourselves to have our builds tell us these things up front? We can force the Maven version. How can we do this? We bring in the Enforcer plugin. Yeah, exactly. Some of you, I was like 40% of you use the Enforcer plugin. This is something that is a guarantee. You configure the Enforcer plugin in your build, and it's going to break first try. Because it's very likely that we have issues in our builds, but we are not aware of. And the great thing about the Enforcer plugin is that it bubble ups those issues depending on the the rules that we configure. So let me show you this project now. So it's the same plain project, but now we have configured the enforcer plugin to do a few things. So we're gonna run, you have a main class. So we have a definition right there. This Java version, this is a custom name. This doesn't match any specific properties that I'm aware of in a plugin, but this one does, the Maven compiler release. But I'm reusing this for a reason, okay? I'm also setting which version of Maven I want to use. But this is, again, just as a property. No one is actually enforcing that this value is going to use. Next, I'm going to configure the enforcer plugin with explicit execution. So I'm going to call it with check, but also going to bind it by default in the initialize phase. So every time that I go through the regular lifecycle phases, this is one of the first ones that gets invoked, so I get this verification early on in my build so I can fail early. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add different rules. The first one, we should have a .mvn directory at the top. This is useful to calculate the root directory, and this is coming into kind of into force, or it's more important if you switch to Maven 4. Currently in version 4, I release candidate 3. Might be the case that Maven 4 comes out for real at the end of the year. We'll see. So what this enforce rule is saying is, if you have these files, they cannot verify that at least you have something that tells me you may be using the wrapper. If you have the wrapper files, they can invoke Maven in a different way. The next thing is, you must have, at the very least, this version of Java. That's the reason why I define a property, so I can reuse it. So if you're running your build with an older version of Java, which isn't the one that is specified, you're going to get a failure. We also say that if you're running the build with a given version of Maven, it has to be the one that is specified, which was 399. So if I run with 398, that will be a failure. I require that every plugin has to have a version. If it's not the case, then it's going to turn that warning that we saw earlier into an error. All right? Then we also have dependency conversions. Who likes to use or follow semantic versioning? Okay, some hands. Is it a problem to have two dependencies with the same group ID, artifact ID, but different version? That's not good, right? It is definitely a big problem. So dependency conversion will say, hey, in your dependency graph, when I have resolved, I have two versions of SLF4J API. One that is 2.0.17 and another is 2.0.15. That's potentially a problem, so this is going to fail it immediately. Then require upper bounds. This is the one that says you want to follow semantic versioning. Why doesn't it have the name semantic version rule? I don't know, but this is the one. Then enforce bytecode version. This is another interesting thing. So if you build libraries and you say my library requires JDK 17 and onward, but then someone consumed it in an application that is Java 8, that's going to be a problem, right? If you have any other dependencies above 17, 21, or 24, and you're building with 21 and 24, then your build might still work, but your consumers will think that everything is 17 or lower, but if that's not the case, you have a dependency that is higher. So this rule says everything that you're going to build and depend on has to match this particular bytecode or less. If it's higher, then the build must fail. And we're also going to ban duplicate classes. They could be the same class, like the log4j classes or SLF4j or something like that, coming from different dependencies because they have been repackaged or shadowed or something else. This is the one that says, I found the same class, the same bytecode in two different dependencies, so this is potentially a problem. Some of these rules are provided by external dependencies, so that's in case that you didn't know, you can add explicit dependencies to plugins in this way. Instead of adding this dependency into the compile-only scope that we have in Maven, which is what? Provided. Don't use it for this case. Define dependencies explicitly on a plugin like this. So bytecode and ban duplicate classes, I think those two rules come from this dependency. All right. So if I were to run my build in this project right now, let's say do a build. Whoop, that is not the case. Has to be enforced. There we go. Do a build, and we get lots of red. Nice. Got all these rules okay, but which ones we fail? We don't have the wrapper files. We are missing a plugin version. All right. So how can we fix this? Well, one way to start fixing this will be, let's add the wrapper file. There is a plugin that allows you to create the wrapper file, which will be Maven wrapper minus the Maven version, whatever version you want. What I'm doing in this, is that a command? Is that a lifecycle phase? That's actually the wrapper plugin, and I'm invoking the wrapper goal on the plugin. The wrapper plugin exposes a few goals that you can call, and in this case, it's going to generate the files required for the wrapper. And if you do not pass any given value for Maven, I think it's going to use the Maven version that you're currently using to invoke the plugin. So in this case, I can pass it any other version and say, yes, I want to use this. I'm not going to create it for this project because I already have it in another one, which is the enforced fix. And in this project, now I have these files, Maven W and Maven command for Windows, and I have that .mvn directory in which we see that we have the wrapper properties file. Okay, so now, yes?
So can you upgrade the Maven wrapper when you use the Maven wrapper?
Yes, you can, because what you could do is invoke. You can do Maven W. Before I do that, let's look at what is the value of the Maven wrapper. We have set it up to 399. Okay, so let's try to downgrade this. Maven W wrapper minus the Maven 398. Yeah. There we go. So now let's cut that 398. Because why not? That's what you told it to do. Yeah, but it's because it's Windows. Okay, so now I downgraded the Maven version, right? Which Maven version did I set in the POM file? And the enforcer will check 399, right? So let's see what happens. If I run, what I'm doing wrong. There we go. Control H. If I do Maven version, this is my currently installed version of Maven using SDK man. It's 399. If I say Maven W version, it's 398. Okay, so I can do Maven W verify and see what happens. Boom, a failure, because we're using the wrong version of Maven, even though we're setting it up using the Maven wrapper. So it might seem a bit redundant to verify that we have the Maven wrapper files and you have the correct Maven version, but once we are accustomed and used to using the Maven wrapper and ensuring that all these things actually work, then it should be less of a problem. We can hide the complexity of configuring the Enforcer plugin into a parent POM on another version of your own super POM within your organization. So this makes things easier. All right. So how can I fix this? Well, I can use again the Maven wrapper to go back to 399 and then invoke the Maven W verify again, and this time the fix works. Yay, green build. Good.
Show how to upgrade the Maven wrapper itself. The Maven, like there are two properties in the property file.
Yes.
One is the version of the Maven, and then the other one is the version of the Maven wrapper.
This one.
Yes.
I actually do this by hand. but I'm not so sure if wrapper Go will do the upgrade for you as well. By default, we're calling the latest version of the plugin. So the other way to invoke the plugin will be, does anyone know the long way to invoke a plugin? Okay, so you have to know what is the group ID, org Apache Maven. And I think in this case will be plugins. Then this will be the Maven wrapper plugin. You have to give it the artifact ID. And then you pass in the version number. If you don't, it will be latest. And then you specify the goal. There is a convenience for many plugins that are part of Apache Maven plugins and the Mojo House group ID, such that we can invoke the shorthand notation. And you can also add more plugins to the list if you change your settings.xml in every place where you want to use this. It's doable? Yes. All right, next one. So we want to enforcer. What is the next one? Reproducible artifacts. What does it mean for a reproducible artifact? Well, if you browse to a, I think, do I have the URL in the README? Maybe? No, I didn't. So there is a website called reproducibles-builds.org that tells you all the guidelines that you have to do in order to build reproducible artifacts in many different source languages, Java being one of them. So in the case of Maven, what we have to do is that every jar and every artifact that we build, we have to define the same timestamp. You pick one. Could be your birthday, could be the Linux epoch, could be anything you want to. But as long as that one is fixed, then everybody will use the same one. The entries on each of these archives have to be in a deterministic order. So it could be sorted alphanumerically. But once you select an algorithm, it has to be the same for the other ones. Files such as XML, YAML, JSON that have content that you could see is separated in different sections, and no matter how you rearrange those sections, your application will be able to read those files and make sense of that. But when you want to compare these things one by one, they have to be identical bit by bit. That means the sections have to be exactly in the same position. So even just one property that is off by one space or something like that will not make that artifact reproducible. So these are the rules that we have to follow. So the good thing for Maven is that creating reproducible archives is pretty much a given in the reproducible order and all that. We only have to provide the timestamp. And that timestamp can be provided by defining just one magic property that the Maven Archiver plugin will follow. You pick any date you want to. Does anyone recognize this name, this date? I'm disappointed in you. This is Back to the Future, which is already in the past, obviously. Okay, so what else do we have here? I also added into the manifest a few entries. For example, when I am in that particular timestamp, it's useful to have it in the entries, but if you can read the manifest and there are other tools that can have access to it, then I also appending that timestamp there, and I also making sure that my application is executable. So when I run the build, this is, no, we're in a different project now, 03. Whoop. How many dots do I need to type? There we go. So when I run the build now, I can look at the jar file on zip-l target blah blah, hello world, and there's a timestamp. And the order of these entries will always be the same. And if I were to inspect what is inside the manifest, I will see the same timestamp. So that will be useful for other tools to consume. And as you can see, setting up that in your build only takes you a couple of XML elements. It's not much that you have to do. Next on, anyone here has to publish to Maven Central? Not really? Okay, do you know the advantages of following the same Guidelines of publishing to Maven Central for your libraries? No? Okay, so I'm just going to go quickly with these ones. So one of the things, there are a few rules that we have to follow in order to publish to Maven Central. So there has to be enough metadata to identify this. I mean, even if you don't publish to Maven Central, it's good that you have the name, the URL, and the licenses, perhaps. There's at least has to be a developer, and Maven Central also requires that you know how to specify the SCM configuration. Maybe this is not so useful in your internal organization, but just so you know that this thing exists. What else we have in this project? We have to provide Javadoc and sources jar for our project in order to push it to Maven Central. So we go into MC now. Oh, I'm running out of time quickly. And there are more things that I want to show. So I'm going to do a clean so you know that I'm not doing anything weird here. And do a clean build. And you notice there were some warnings about the Javadoc because Javadoc since Java 8 is very pedantic. I didn't add any tags to it. So it's telling me, oh, you dum-dum, you didn't add anything. And then here's the sources jar. Every time that I do a build, every time that I do a package, I will generate the Javadoc and the sources. Does that make sense? When the only thing that I want to do is test, and test requires package. Hence, I build the Javadoc and the sources every time I'm doing a test. Is it worthwhile? And it's actually going to make my builds much slower because every time I'm going to generate that. And if you have a multi-module project, then how many Javadocs and sources jars are you generating? Doesn't make any sense. So what we can do is move these concerns into a profile. Anyone here know what profiles are? Okay, half of you, pretty good. So I may be saying something wrong, but it's kind of like if you want to have conditionals in your POM, if you want to enrich the capabilities of your POM, given certain capabilities, then use profiles. In this case, I'm defining a profile with just an ID. I could have said the activation that the profile will be a given file exists, or a given version of the JDK exists, or is configured, or something else. In this case, I'm going to activate this profile explicitly whenever I define that I want to use isID. And what is happening here is that the Javadoc and the sources plugin have been moved into that profile. Thus, in the main execution of my project, I'm going to use the same command as before. You'll see no Javadoc, no Java sources, right? But when I activate the plugin, the profile, which is a publication, if I type it correctly, like this, then I get the Javadoc and I get the sources. You can do the same for pretty much every other element in the POM file. So put in your POM file in the main line everything that is needed as a minimum to build the project, and anything else that may be conditional, for example, building a Docker image, using Docker Compose, stuff like that, just put it into another profile. Who uses a Spring Boot? Most people. You know that you can create Graal native images with a Spring Boot, and the reason why there is a new profile that is called native is because of this. You don't want to be creating native images all the time because they're slow whenever you do Maven package or Maven verify. You have to activate the profile explicitly. This is the reason. All right, next one, let's go, we can skip the Echo one. Aggregator, oh, this is an interesting one. Does anyone know here what an aggregator POM file is? Besides Robert, obviously. Does anyone here know what a parent POM is? Okay, everybody should know. How do you define you want to have a multi-project build? A multi-project build. You have to have a POM with a module section, right? And do you also mark that particular POM file as a parent of any of the children POMs that you have? That is the most common case. So an aggregator POM file is nothing more than a POM that defines a modules section like this, which, by the way, in Maven 4, this has been renamed to sub-projects. Both modules and sub-projects will be available, and likely whenever Maven 5 comes out, we have to have Maven 4 first. Then modules will be removed, so be aware of that. So this is an aggregator. Now, if I look into core, there is a POM file there, and I define the root that is the aggregator as my parent. It is the child, the one that defines the relationship within the parent and the child, and it's not the parent. The parent has no clue how many children he has. That's kind of weird, but that's the way it is. The reason why we're doing this is because we will inherit all the properties coming from the root, which is just the group ID, the artifact ID, well, not the artifact, the group ID and version number. But then this one also becomes another aggregator, right? And I think that inside core and API and business, these just are plain POM files that could have more explicit properties about it. This is how we usually lay out a multi-project build. And I think we can go into, what was it? 6? No. One level up. And this is aggregator. And we go into the aggregator classic. I don't have any source code here, so when I do a full build, then it builds all my projects and it's telling me some warnings that the jar is empty just because I don't have any source code. So it decided to build all the modules here. Now, is there a way that I can tell Maven to just build, for example, the API? How will you do that? Let's do clean, so we don't have anything. And we can say maven-pl, and I want API, right? But API depends on core, which depends on root. Let's see what happens. Oh, I didn't tell it to do anything, right? Build. Yeah, that worked. I did not have to specify any other command line flag. I'm using which version of Maven? This is 399. Okay. I could, what was the other thing that was, the other projects that we're looking at, which were SMS, for example. Let's see if the same thing happens with XMS. So let's build the SMS project and see what happens. Ah, it's missing a dependency. How do we fix this? Thank you, because other people would have said, let's do clean install. So the SPI plugin will be resolvable from a repository, and then it will work. But the way that we do this is we say, also make the projects that I depend on. So in this case, I depend on SPI, which depends on API, which depends on core, which depends on root. So all these things are going to be built, but not the rest. But what if I fix something in SMS and I want to also check that everybody that is consuming SMS will work? There is another flag that doesn't make sense to specify here, but I don't have that use case. It's called also make dependence. So it's going to build everything that SMS requires, and then everybody that depends on SMS is also going to be built. And if any one of them has any other requirements, because I put AM, then it's going to build everything. It might be the whole reactor, or it could be just a subset of it. So this is how you can also be a little bit faster by just building smaller pieces of your reactors instead of building the whole project every single time.
Can you have multiple arguments in PL?
Yes, you can have multiple arguments of PL. You can separate it by a comma, I believe, and you can also specify it again using this, if I'm not mistaken. Well, SMS doesn't make any case. SPI, like that. Yes?
On the AM, on the second time, does it still build all the other dependencies?
It builds everybody that depends on those two projects as well. So it builds everything that those projects need to be built, so the incoming and then also the outgoing. But anything else that is not part of that graph will be untouched.
So even if there are no changes in the other files, it will still...
Correct. All right, 4 minutes left. There's one thing that I would like you to know also. Dependency management. We probably could kind of skip it. There is one thing. Yeah, I said we're gonna spend like 5 hours talking about this one. I have a project here that has 2 dependencies on lang4j, commons lang, and SLA4j simple. I was about to say langchain4j because if I don't mention AI, did I ever had a session at the conference, right? So the source file here is quite simple, and it has a dependency, explicit dependency on SLA4j API, not on commons lang and not on simple, obviously, right? So I can, whoops, that's not what I want to do. I want to go 1 level up, another level up, and this is not in cache, but this is version 8. The dependency management, that's not the one. Stop. I can say invoke Maven dependency analyze, and this will tell me that I have an undeclared dependency, SLA4j API, because that's what I'm consuming in my source files. And I have declared 2 dependencies on my POM file that I'm not actually using. So the way to fix this, and we can upgrade this warning into an error if we wanted to. Let's see if it actually works this time. I go here and tell that I want to use API. And I comment out this dependency, or in your case, we'll probably remove it, and then invoke analyze again. No problems found. Right. The last bit that I wanted to tell you about to make things faster is the dependency cache extension. So let's run this particular project. I think this is version 09. Okay, 09, go here. Let me change something in MVN directory. Comment this out because this is already the solution. And let's do Maven clean verify. And we get this time 0.4. Let's do it again and again and again. It's quite consistent. And if our project is big, obviously it's going to take more time. Now, let's activate the cache like this. Whoop. And let's run the build once. Okay, a bit faster. Let's do it again. And again. And again. And it's skipping all that because it's already cached. So your builds become much, much faster. There is a way, and this is only works on your local environment. If you want to have a remote cache, there is a way to configure the extension. It's a little bit more elaborate. That's what I didn't show it, but it's possible to do it. So with this, we're pretty much on time. And I can go back to here and say, thank you for staying here. You're being awesome. I hope that you learned a few things in this particular session. Again, the source code is available. You can follow me online, ask any questions, any follow-ups. Thank you so much.